All right. Well, welcome everyone. This is our hash it out. This is we're talking a little bit about kind of the state of cloud today and how things are working out in kind of the environment. And I've known Brandon for a long time. We used to work together. I used to do a lot of cloud migrations and stuff. And so it's nice to kind of get to talk to an old colleague and an old friend, and really kind of dive into some of the modern challenges and things that we're kind of dealing with. And so, Brandon, uh, again, just want to give you a second to introduce yourself, and kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and Upcurve.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tony. It is great to work with you again and speak with you. Always a pleasure. So, yeah, like Tony said, my name is Brandon Ferreira. I am the Director of Client Success at Upcurve Cloud. And basically, what Upcurve Cloud does is we are a premier partner for Google. So when organizations need support or services regarding Google Cloud, Google Workspace, etc., they typically come to us and we provide that to them. We manage all sizes of organizations and all sort of verticals and industries, and try to find things that are going to benefit their organization the most. And a lot of things that are coming up recently is security and bolstering security postures. So perfect timing.
Yep. Yeah. So that's kind of interesting. I think that's really what I want to start today is, what I remember, especially from back in the day. It was definitely one of those things where once you start looking at moving information to a public cloud, a more collaborative suite situation, you immediately have to start looking at different pieces of data security. Are we making sure that our network perimeter is there, if at all? If it's still there, is it hardened? If it's not, where did it go? And so those are the types of things that immediately pop into my head. What would you say are kind of some of the key things to talk about with clients as they move into that public cloud arena?
Yeah, there's a lot of things to consider when moving into that, especially if they're moving from something like an on-premises system and they're moving to the cloud, or they're moving from one system to another. A lot of times people are under the false assumption that, well, we're in the cloud, it's safe, we're secure now, everything's great. Whereas it's probably a little bit more secure than like a bordered in-house kind of environment, just because you can see things a little bit better and you can address them a little bit quicker. There's still some safeguards that we have to put into place. So some of the things that we immediately want to talk to our clients about are access control and
Sure.
managing the data, and then also the end user actual training of it, making sure people know how to use the systems that they're being given access to and how to stay safe and secure within them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's funny. So access control always, in my mind, kind of starts keying in. Okay, well, what compliances and government regulations are requiring these things, and maybe they're not government, right? Maybe they're regulatory in terms of like certain business verticals and things like that. But those are all things you have to start kind of putting together because again, things aren't kind of secured behind your firewalls and in your network. Now we're kind of out in the open, and we have to make sure that we're doing things like storing data properly and making sure communications are properly secured and stuff like that. So that is a really interesting point. What other kind of key things would you say besides securing the communications collaboration things would you say are kind of prevalent to bring up on those onboarding calls, right, or those initial conversations?
Yeah, I mean, outside of communications, it's really important to see basically what their security posture is. Okay, well, how do you have your service account set up? Do you have two-factor authentication enabled or multi-factor authentication? What are you
Yep.
using if you are in a regulated industry? Like you mentioned earlier, oftentimes a driving factor for security conversations is because they're in a regulated industry. The
Yep.
government's come out with this new compliance and we need to meet it. That's not
Yep.
always the case. There's times where IP needs to be protected or just general sensitive information that would be detrimental to an organization if it got out of the kind of environment. And so kind of trying to find all those paths and where things are flowing to, how things are ingress and egressing are
Mhm.
probably the first points, and some other things that we like to look for when we're initially talking and doing that onboarding procedure.
Yeah, and you said something that I think is probably one of those things that's more on the practical side than, here's all these tools that you can buy to kind of fix things, and that's training the users, right? Because
Yeah.
what we have found, it really, whether it's on-prem, cloud, or whatever, is that the end user is kind of the key threat or the thing that attackers are keying in on. And so making sure that those users are informed, educated, and kind of uh, made aware that they can actually do things to benefit the company as opposed to just kind of hiding things, right? Like the old, I remember, the old IT shows of like, oh man, you just got a phishing email. I just won't tell anyone, right? Like that attitude won't do anymore. That is something that has to kind of come out and be trained so that they know not to do that, right? Not just go along with things as they go. Do you, yeah. So do you think that with the customers you're working with, do you think that they're kind of coming at a situation of, well, I want to move directly into the cloud? Are they looking at more of a hybrid environment where it's public cloud and a little bit on-prem? Are they immediately adopting the cloud and moving into like multi-cloud where they've got something kind of everywhere? What are your conversations kind of looking like when it comes to moving forward? Is it baby steps? What are you seeing?
Yeah, well, kind of the beauty of not being verticalized or only working with specific industries is we come across kind of every different scenario, which is good. It makes us pretty diverse in being able to answer complex questions regardless of where they're coming from. And so the answer is, yeah, we see all of that. We see some people taking baby steps and just putting one or a couple of their applications, maybe their productivity suites, into the cloud. And then we see people just saying like a big cutover. Okay, we're done on-prem. Everything's going to the cloud today. Everyone hold on, kind of thing. So yeah, we're definitely seeing that. And those each create unique challenges in regards to security, because the more kind of access points that you have, the more difficult it is to manage. But there are ways around that so you can make that less, so it doesn't feel like, okay, we have all these doors open. How do we lock all of them? There are better ways around that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like what comes to mind immediately is like single sign-on, right? So the first thing to do is lock everything down under one, main tenant or one single strategy, right? And kind of when you start thinking about like best practices for data governance, and network and access governance, right? It's hard not to start thinking about the different pillars of zero trust, where you're saying, okay, well, I have to make sure my network's secure. I have to make sure my communications and my users are secure, and that we are authenticating against something that is a little higher level with MFA and things like that. So I think what ends up kind of coming into focus is, what are we doing about the actual data? And is the solution, I know I found at least several years ago, the solution was, well, we'll keep the data on servers in-house and we'll put all of the applications in the cloud, right? And that's a good answer, because all of this stuff is behind my castle, that I've guarded and put a moat around, and it's protected. But that's really not a good way to make sure that information can travel and can be collaborative, right? So what are you seeing your customers doing in terms of that data now, right? Years ago that was one answer, but what are they doing now? Are they trusting cloud systems a little bit more, or what do you see?
I mean, sometimes you do see that, but we definitely advocate for zero trust control. And like you're saying, to kind of further the metaphor of the castle, yes, it's great. You've locked it down. You have your walls and everything. It's protected. But what happens when somebody needs to leave the castle or come in the castle, and you're kind of opening it up to bad actors, or kind of any men in the middle attacks or anything like that? So really, what do we need to protect? And that's the data itself. That way, whether it's in the castle, it's moving out of it, it's going into your different cloud applications on-prem, no matter where it's actually flowing, you're protecting the data itself. Not saying you shouldn't secure your endpoints, because you should, in your applications, but it's a lot less troublesome and a lot less to have to worry about if you know that no matter where the data actually goes, you still have access and control over it. You still can put different rules on it. And so that way, if something were to occur, you're able to kind of take action on that, regardless of where it's sitting at that time.
Great points. And what I feel like is ultimately the goal that everyone was striving to, kind of starts taking less and less manpower to get there, because all of these goals have been around for a long time, right? In terms of making sure that things stay secure and protected and whatnot. And like you said, sometimes you have to open the doors to the kingdom to kind of let that information in, and that you don't want to do that. That's not good practice. But sometimes you simply didn't have the manpower to do that. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things I've seen in terms of when people start moving into a public cloud system and scenario, is that the need for all of those engineers and techs and overseeing bodies to be able to kind of make sure that happens starts to become less. And so it becomes a lot more realistic, right? Especially for your SMB and mid-market teams that may not have a giant IT team, right? May not have that ability to be able to invest in things like that. So to me, I see it as a really great thing, a really good way for everyone to lead with a security mindset, right? As opposed to just, well, if we can get there, we'll get there.
Yeah, kind of tying back to what you said earlier about the kind of the practical ways that we can safeguard data, and a lot of that comes from the user. I think the number is 80% of data breaches are from human error, which is natural because that's what we do. But
right.
As you kind of get into this small mid-market space, like you were saying, and you kind of start having these more complex problems, what often tends to happen is not necessarily, oh, we need to, hire a bunch, we need to invest a bunch to make sure this is secure. Kind of goes the opposite direction. People start being less secure. They're like, well, there's too many things to do here. There's too many controls, too many rules. This is just making it hard to get my job done. I just need to send this email. Why do we need to worry about all that? And then that's where problems start occurring. So the easier we can make that and the more knowledge we can provide them. So kind of attacking it from two angles, both the training and then also real controls that kind of just help as a backup when they might not accidentally, we hope people aren't doing things maliciously, but accidentally there might be a breach, then we want to make sure we can cover all that too.
Yeah, 100% agree with that, especially because, I would love to say that everyone is security top of mind. And as much as people want that to be the case, if it's not easy to use, people aren't using it, right? I mean, people have work to do and they just don't have time to have to jump through 20 hoops. They're going to find some easier way to do it because they've got 50 other things to do on their plate that day. And so that has always been my experience. And so I think you're spot on when you say that if it's not easy to use and if the users are not properly trained and we don't have all of these things in place where it's just comprehensive, then it's just not going to get used. And it doesn't matter what level of training or what fancy software you purchase, it's just not going to happen. And so that becomes, I think, almost the most important thing, right? Is making sure that your product is easy to use, and then everything else kind of falls into place. Is it secure? Is it meeting compliance and things like that? But that ease of use piece and being able to not only be easy for your users to use, but for your recipients and people that you're collaborating with to be able to use in a simple platform is something that is paramount in my viewpoint.
Yeah. Definitely.
Awesome.
The harder it is to use, the less likely they are, and that's not really a good thing when it comes to security. So.
No, yeah. What does, so the other thing I kind of want to talk about a little bit is, in terms of your onboarding, what would you say is the priority as far as teaching those users best practice during your change management, right? Is security in there? Is it the first thing you talk about? Where would you say, kind of bringing on that new customer, where would you say that information is kind of brought up and talked about?
Yeah, for most of our onboardings, we do provide end user security awareness training. That's part of the training that starts to come into place once they have access to the system. We kind of pepper it in to begin with, being like, well, you might have done it this way in your old system. Be prepared. You're going to have new controls, new rules, new protocols and procedures going into this new system. But really, once they have access to it, or right before they do, preferably, that's when we get into the training and start teaching them, okay, this is kind of what you should be looking out for in this environment. These are some of the messages you might receive, and things like, watch out for the old go get a gift card for your CEO scams. Those kind of things are still as prevalent as they always have been. So that's kind of when we start getting into it. But ideally, the environment is set up so once they get into it, once they're dropped into it, they're as set up for success as they can be from the get-go.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds about right, because ultimately, when you start talking about those things, there's a lot of change, right? From what it looks like in an on-prem environment to what it looks like in a cloud and remote worker environment, right? And sometimes there's a little in between, sometimes there's not. It just really depends. And so I think introducing that training at that key step is probably a really, really good place to start talking about different tools and start talking about different solutions. They're going to help meet those data governance requirements, in terms of that thing. Yeah. So, are there any, and again, just simply because it's been a while, are there any emerging technologies or emerging applications that you guys are seeing apart from Virtue, of course, that are something that you're like, man, we really like this, like a cloud management software, or what are you seeing that's like a tool that really leads that security first, or making sure that the data is secure first type scenario?
Yeah, I mean, outside of Virtue. So Google is definitely making some big strides in that. They certainly lean on their partners, their security partners, but things like making their client-side encryption more available, more accessible. Of course, that still needs to have a key management system or server in place for that. But we're seeing that becoming more and more popular, and Google's pushing that more in their lower tiers.
Yeah.
Outside of Google, we're working with some tools now that protect for things like ransomware scanning and security posture kind of dashboard, if you will, kind of showing you that these are the controls you have set up. These are the ones that might meet your compliance. So you should configure it in this way. Just kind of, again, taking down the barriers that make it difficult to manage your data and manage the security of it. So that way, an admin who may not have all the time in the world to just sit and look at security dashboards all day can be able to make decisions on the fly and make sure that they're secure. So we're using a lot of applications in that regard to kind of give you a better look at the data that's in your environment and then having actionable items for it.
Yeah, and I mean, the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? It's that onion layer approach to security. I have a lot of things looking at a lot of different things, and as long as I can have some sort of cohesive report, then that actually greatly helps me, right? And so that's awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, awesome. I have asked a lot of questions. Do you have any questions of me?
No, I think it's been great. I think we kind of covered some of the biggest points that are coming up with a lot of our customers right now, and just more and more so, like I said at the top of the call, I think more industries, or sorry, rather, more organizations are finding out that this is important. It's not really a back burner item anymore. We'll get to it when we get to it. Because the other side of it, the bad actors are just getting better and smarter and more sophisticated with their tools as well. So we need to be able to be kind of on the front lines combating that. And
Absolutely.
I think all these things that we've talked about are the right direction for pretty much all organizations at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Brendan, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you kind of carving this out in your day, and look forward to doing more business in the future with you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you. Talk to you later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.